We are recording this. Good to go. All right. Welcome to Midlife Mail. I am Greg Scheinman. Today I am joined by my friend Bart Foster. I first met Bart through our mutual friend, speaker, and author of Hunting Discomfort, Sterling Hawkins. Not long after, but longer than I wanted it to be because we played a bunch of phone tag, text tag. We're both always on the road, but not too long after, had the opportunity to hike and plunge with Bart out in Boulder, Colorado, alongside my son Auden. We'll get into that and what that really meant to me and to us. Bart is one of those guys who embodies the full package: husband, father, athlete, entrepreneur, advisor, coach, leader. After a prolific career as an entrepreneur and executive, he's taken everything he's learned and poured it into business outside, a groundbreaking program that gets leaders and teams out of the boardroom and into nature. It is all about shifting perspective, building connection, and rediscovering clarity and purpose in the outdoors. One of the things I admire most about Bart is that he doesn't just preach this philosophy, he actually lives it, whether it's on the trail, in the river, swimming 13.5 miles or so. I want to talk about that and just the way he leads his own life and his proof that the best business strategies are often forged outside, not in. As an entrepreneur and seasoned global executive, he began his career at Kellogg's in Novartis. Did I get that right?
Novartis.
Novartis. I did not. Okay.
That's right.
Climbing the corporate ladder, like so many of us, before building a successful healthcare startup and finding his true calling in midlife as an advisor, speaker, author, and coach to executives throughout the world. You can see him here. As he said, he lives in Boulder, which ain't too shabby, with his wife and two kids. And you can typically find him hiking, swimming, and now CrossFitting around town, or yelling out my name on a random street corner at 6:30 in the morning when I'm walking to coffee, and he has already finished his workout, and so many other things. I am just thrilled to have you here. Welcome to Midlife Mail, Bart Foster.
Good to be here. Thank you. That was an amazing intro. I appreciate that. You covered it all.
We're done now. Thank you very much. Go back and go hiking.
Yeah.
I wasn't joking when I said, like, look, last week or whatever, 2 weeks ago, I'm walking to go get coffee in the morning from in Boulder, and you're at a stoplight, and I hear somebody calling my name, which I don't expect in Boulder or really anywhere. It's not a stoplight, and there's you in the car, and you're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm going to get coffee." And typical boy, you're like, "Hop in, let's go." And you had already finished your workout in the morning. So I just want to start there. What have you already done today?
Oh, you mean this morning? I
Yes.
uh I swam out at the Boulder Reservoir, and then I had a buddy come over and we did a sauna cold plunge session that we just cycled through. And yeah, getting
What time,
after it.
what time do you typically get started?
The swim this morning was at 6. So yeah, like all of us, I think we get up a little earlier now. But I could have to go to bed earlier. That's the only thing. Yeah,
What time is that typically for you?
10. Yeah.
Okay. And how far did you swim this morning?
3,000 yards, maybe 3,500, a couple miles, 2 miles.
These are the things that
Uh,
fascinate me. Like, okay, up at 6, out in the lake, then the buddy comes over. Okay, like the old army thing. It's like we do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day. Like I'm
I
always
will,
fascinated by guys who just live like that.
I will tell you though, at 3, I'm done. I just crash and I'm out. And my team knows, like, don't schedule shit after 3 because I'm not worth anything.
Well, let me
But
ask you that too, now that you mentioned. How is that different and how does that feel, let's say, compared to your prior life or prior endeavors?
one of my top values is personal freedom. And for me, that means being able to do the things that I want to do when I want to do them with the people that I want to do it with. And I think that was a big learning for me and the shift thing. So yeah, now I have the fortune that I can create more of an intentional life and a life by design. And part of that is in the hours that I am optimizing for performance.
Can you walk us through that a little bit, your personal path, coming up into
Mm,
kind of your career, starting at Kellogg's, ultimately this life by design, which I love. But it,
yeah.
it takes a while to figure out what even kind of life I wanted, what kind of life am I living? And how
Right.
did I get into this life? And then ultimately, what kind of life do I want to be living? And how do I put that design together? And over what period of time did that take? I think that's a spot where a lot of guys kind of
100%.
kind of get, really confused and frustrated. Do I quit my job and follow my passion? When do I do it? If I do it, can I have life by design if I actually am working for somebody else also
Right.
in there too?
Yeah, so I'll give you the quick journey. So I was a big company guy for a number of years. I was with Kellogg's, selling cereal and Rice Krispie treats and Pop Tarts and all the things you say are healthy for you. And then I joined Novartis, sold contact lenses. I was in the eye care division of Novartis, and it was there. Walmart was my biggest customer, and I was living in England. And they said, "Help us figure out a way to drive traffic from the store into the vision center," because they all these vision centers. And anyway, I had this light bulb moment in 2004, and I said, "What if we had a kiosk? It would screen your vision. It would tell you if you're 20/20. And so instead of what's better, one or two, you could do it yourself." And that was a business that I incubated inside Novartis for a couple of years, and then I spun out a company called Solo Health, and it was all about do-it-yourself healthcare. So that morphed into, you've probably seen the blood pressure machines like in Walmart and some of the, that was the company I founded. And I ran that as CEO and founder for 7 years. I got a call I waited for 4 years from Walmart in the summer of 2012, and they said, "Your pilot exceeded our expectations. How soon can you be in 4,000 stores?" It's like, holy shit, and got to raise. We had raised 50 million in capital and scaled this thing, and I was so proud. And fast forward 18 months, and my chairman said, "Hey, can you go to breakfast?" And we went to the Flying Biscuit in Atlanta. And I sit down, and this big, broad shouldered guy, he had taken 3 companies public. And he said, "How big do you want this company to get?" And I shared a number. And he said, "Bart, every once in a while, I see a company that has all the makings of going public. And this is one of those times." And he said, "We'll have to make a few changes." And I said, "Oh, yeah, we'll need a new CFO." And I wasn't picking up what he was laying down. And he said, "Bart, I'd even be CEO for a while." And long story short, I got forced out of a company I founded. And for me at the time, and I was 39 years old, I was really lost, and I was embarrassed and angry and pissed off. And I had this range of emotions because for me, without the CEO title, who am I? And so much of my personal identity was tied up in that company that it was a real eye opener. Fortunately, I was in a YPO forum, and they helped me realize, like, look, you're still the same guy. Go do something else. And my wife and I ended up spending a few months in. I did something really important for me, and this goes to the life by design. It was, I did an exercise with some friends about what is your personal values, and create a personal value statement. And it became my North Star. And now it's one of the leading exercises we do with teams and forums and executives. And it's, if we can really get clear with what we want, then we can create a life that's happening by us instead of to us. Because so often, I was waiting, well, if this happens and when this happens, and I was on the defensive. And ever since then, I could flip it, and I flipped it to the offensive. So that's the beginning of a life by design. And I'll pause there. I'm happy to give more details, but yeah, I'm on a whole new path. I live in Boulder, Colorado now.
Can you talk a little bit more about getting forced out? Was it the control of the company being in the hands of those who financed the company? Also, I think, was it, if you're comfortable asking, was it lucrative for you? Okay. Was it because, and I've had
Yeah,
this
I'll share the whole thing.
conversation with
Sure.
some other, like I have a close friend of mine that was similarly forced out of a fund that he had started, and it was very lucrative for him. And we've been having this conversation about, did you actually win or lose?
Yeah. Well,
Like overall, like when you really
I,
step away and think about the whole thing, from when you're
100%,
in it,
yeah,
it's emotional and you lose your identity or you lose control of the fund or the business or so on and so forth. And then when you really 6, 8 months, 12 months, maybe later, and you sit there and you go, okay, well, I
right.
have, you know what I'm saying? Like all of these things that you think about for your identity. Is it the money? Is it the identity? Is it the job itself? Is it the opportunity to do something different? All of those things in that bucket.
So for me, right, I was there's all kinds of different CEOs, and I was a really great early stage CEO. And once we scaled and it became more service and maintenance and logistics and finance. I mean, we had 4,000 kiosks, right? And they were getting used 4 or 5 million times a month. And it just wasn't me. And I didn't feel as passionate yet as a first time CEO. I didn't realize there was the path, I could have positioned myself, brought in a president. I just didn't know that. And so in hindsight, like I wanted that to happen. I just wish it would happen in my terms. And what happened was, when you have a powerful board um, and a lot of investors, right? When I started the company, I owned 100% of it. Well, after you raise 50 million in capital, it's not your company anymore. And I got, diluted down, and the chairman, they made him executive chairman. And all of a sudden, you can't have two CEOs. It just didn't work. So that's kind of how it happened. Now, in terms of the monetary and what ended up happening, I ended up staying on the board for 2 years. Um, because I knew where I knew everything. I was able to ask the challenging questions, and eventually the chairman, ended up buying me out. I would say I didn't hit a home run. I hit a single monetarily. Lifestyle, I hit a home run, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I didn't know it at the time. In fact, it was such a jolt to my ego uh, and just who I was and my personal identity that it was really tough. Probably the toughest 6 months of my life.
Mm.
Um,
What is a
but then,
person?
yeah,
You know, what is
say
it?
it again.
I was going to ask you then, which leads into the personal value statement. What is a personal value statement? Where did you come up with it? Uh, did you develop it yourself? Was it in a book or a temple or somewhere else? And then how do you go about, I guess, writing one? What did you do?
Yeah. So I learned it originally from a friend of mine who's in my YPO forum. Her name's Christy Orris, and Christy had these cards, and we sorted the cards into different piles. And eventually you narrowed it down to 20 that mean the most to you. And then you narrowed it down to 10. And you take those 10 values, and there's no right or wrong, right? It's just, what do you value? And you take those 10 and you put them into a pyramid with the number one value at the top all the way down. And then we talked about it and we said, why is that your top value? And what does that mean? And then we took those top 6 to 10 and we created a personal value statement. And once you have those values, it's actually a lot easier than you think. And when I work with teams and corporations and things, I just say, I just want your SFD. Your SFD is your shitty first draft, right? And you take this and for me, what happened was it became like my North Star. And it was such an important part of making decisions and having decision making framework that now, I wrote it in my book, and I have whole exercises in the appendix, and people could do it themselves. But essentially, it's getting really clear of what do you value. And then we do an assessment after we create the personal value statement. I say, okay, take your top 6 values, and I want you to write down next to it a number: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the last 6 months, how much you leaned into that particular value. 1 is never, 5 is always. Right? 1 is never, 5 is always. And inevitably, no one has all 5s. And what I share with people is, look, to create an intentional life, these are your values. They're not mine. And if you value those, what do you need to shift in your life? So I say, pick one thing that's lower than you want. And what's one meaningful step you can start doing on Monday to take it from a 2 to a 3 or a 3 to a 4? And it's just a really quick, easy way to say, am I aligned with my values? So because that made such a big impact on me, I love sharing with other people, because when we go into companies, corporations, you can do it with your family. And once you know the top value of some of your top people or your spouse, like my number one value for my wife is trust, right? So what happens if you challenge somebody's top value? It creates this visceral reaction, right? but that's the personal values, and I'm happy to share a link to a worksheet with your listeners, and they can create one themselves.
Would love to see that. I think everybody would. And I'd love to put that in the piece as well. Once you have it, like you said, you're talking about going from a two to a three or three to a four. Once you have it, how long did it take for you to start activating and implementing it? Meaning, hey, it's one thing to go, okay, I can put down the Coca-Cola, or the beer and swap it for water. It's another thing to, I mean, whether those are financial value, whether it's values or turning your passion and go, wow, I'm so inspired by this. I want to make it a business, or figuring out again what it is that I want to do with my life based on these experiences now that I've had, or the situation and circumstance that I find myself in, still as a very young man. Like you said, because we
Yeah,
were in, sounds like very similar situations. Even when I got out of my last company, I would say it was probably a double, to the extent, not a single, not a home run, double.
right.
I'm in my 40s, early 40s. We both have younger kids, families, everything else, the way we want. Okay, like I have to I still have to, I have to do something. There are things I want to do and things that I get to do, but I also have to do something and think about what that is and what I wanted to learn from the experience. How did you see it?
I saw it as a North Star and a way to make decisions and to figure out what I wanted next. And that whole concept of life happening to you versus by you was really impactful. It's so simple, yet that one little shift, because I think I was hoping I got bought out. I was wondering when this is going to happen. I was going after different positions or looking at different career opportunities. And I was like, wait a minute. And it was an advisor. He's like, take a step back. What do you value? And let's create a life by design so that we know exactly what you want. Now, when I advise other CEOs that are in the transition of some sort, it's like, hey, let's get crystal clear of what do you value and what's your zone of genius. That we didn't talk about that. What do you love and you're great at, right? Because your zone of genius, if you think about it, there's four quadrants, right? There's things we love, there's things we hate, there's things we're terrible, and there's things we're great at. Top right, love and great. So, as an example, in the zone of genius, like I'm actually pretty good at managing a team. I just don't like it. I'm terrible at finance and I hate it, right? But the top right box, love and great, leading with passion, enthusiasm, uh, turning a vision into reality, galvanizing a group. So that led me to facilitation, keynote speaking, because that's my zone of genius. And I figured out if you can create a life that's aligned with your values and your zone of genius 90% of the time, you're going to be happier, healthier, more productive.
Hmm. Yeah, I call it, that intersection of personal passion and professional expertise. Like if you can hit that
Yeah.
in there, now you've really got something on that. How was your wife throughout all of this?
She's like a rock, man. She just trusted me. Uh, I think she knew I was, when I was going through a difficult time and trying to figure out what's next, and she would just whatever. I was really lucky that she took, 90% of all of the home domestic things with the kids and school, and I didn't have to worry about any of those emails. And I was really lucky because there's a lot of other people that are not in that spot.
Mm. Mark has had a comment about this mentality being totally missing from today's startup culture, all about chasing versus directing. What do you think about that? It's a good point.
Maybe clarify a little bit.
Marcus, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, put me on the spot, Greg. Well, so,
Okay. Hey,
uh,
you put it in the chat, man. We're in
no, I know. No, I mean, I know Bart well. I'm aware of his journey. It's amazing. But what I found is that when you look at today's startup culture, right? And there's always because most of it's driven from the top down, right? From the financial purview, private equity, VC, what have you. I think what's become so lost is building and managing a company for aligning with that North Star versus just looking for the exit. And the majority of decisions are, let's be the next Apple or Amazon or whatever, right? And I think what's been lost, especially amongst folks like us who have experience and have had the experience of working through the difficult times, with a North Star generally there, it's just turned into a general shit show. And I'm talking more from the digital health tech space, which I've been a part of. But, I'm curious to see, Bart, you touch a lot of companies. What's your sense of kind of how this cultural shift is ongoing? And maybe I'm misreading it. If I'm misreading it too, definitely, call me out on it.
No, you're hitting it. So a few things I'll share. One, we're getting a lot of traction with PE backed companies, and the PE want us to work with their portfolio companies because they're seeing this increased rate of burnout and these culture where people don't trust each other. And now with this remote and hybrid workforces, and you're not in the office together, right? You still have to get together, but it's not about the boondoggles of the past and boozing up at the bar. Like they want genuine connection because that's what people are craving. They're sitting at home and they don't have this connection. So they're starting to see it. And COVID just accelerated all of it. So there is a shift. And the younger generation, I'll tell you, they're much more in touch with their feelings, emotions, what they want. This gig economy, they're doing two or three things sometimes. It's completely shifted. So people our age, and I think we're all in a similar spot. We've got to realize what's happening and the way I grew up, and I think we're a similar age. There was a personal you and a business you, and you left the personal you at home, and that's what it was. And I don't think that's true. There's one you, and the more we can bring our full selves, right? We're not just colleagues and coworkers. We're mothers and fathers and caregivers, and the more we realize that, in the companies that embrace that, those are the ones that are going to be most successful. The ones that are just focused on the exit, and it can work short term, and some get lucky, and it's like, okay, they time it and it hit the window. But for the most part, the ones that try that, it's short lived, and then they burn out, and they're like, oh shit, now I need another CFO, and now I need this guy, and then it's constant rat race.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was having a combo this morning, actually with someone you might know, but he's same age as us, and I think you hit it on the head. The younger generation is definitely in touch with their emotions and kind of all that type of stuff. But I think what's missing, and part of what you said, is relationship building, right? And what we all have had experience at, whether it was, going to the bar or hopping on a flight with someone, sitting in a cab, rushing to the airport, all those micro experiences, over the course of years or decades build up into trust and relationships. And ultimately, sales is, especially enterprise sales, is relationship building at the end of the day, and I think it's those types of experience, which, because of we're in a, hybrid, remote, whatever you want to call it, world, are very difficult to do unless forced. And when it's forced, the younger generation feels it's forced. When it's forced on us now, who now value the personal part of what's yielded out of all this, right? That we can create kind of that time for ourselves and create that space. It's a challenge. I think it's how do we kind of figure that out
Yeah.
across generations going forward. So thanks for your perspective.
Well, I think it's a great segue also into what you're really doing now with Business Outside, which is, I think you saw a real void, in the marketplace. You saw a real void with people and with companies, and with what has been transpiring, if you will, in the corporate ecosystem, in the corporate sphere. And you said, okay, we can do something about this.
Yeah.
I'm curious to how you said you're in that zone of genius, idea to execution. Right? You were talking about the exact same thing, to ideas to execution, in there too. And how you took this idea, when you had this idea, and said, okay, I can take this idea and I really want to execute on this again as my
Yeah.
real authentic self in my zone of genius, my life by design. This fits, in your.
Yeah. It happened very organically. I'll give you the origin. So when I first moved to Boulder, I didn't know anybody and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I felt a little lost. And I would reach out to people to network if what I thought was the right thing to do, which is, can you have coffee? Do you want to have lunch? And this one woman, she said, she was a venture capitalist. She said, I don't do coffee or lunch. She said, meet me at the trailhead. We're going to go for a hike. And I remember telling my wife, like, I don't know what to wear. I'm going to this hiking meeting. Because in Atlanta, Marcus, no, you don't do hiking meetings. That's just not a thing. Right? Maybe it's becoming that. But something special happened that day. I was more authentic. I felt more alive. I remember she asked me, like, what do you do? And it kind of transitioned to what I used to do. And she's like, no, no, like, what do you, and I just admitted, and I stopped on the trail and I looked at her and I said, I got forced out of the company I founded. And I thought for sure she'd be like, oh my gosh, tell me more. And she's like, oh yeah, it happens all the time. And just kept walking. And I was like, wait, but it told me that I'm going to be okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. And in fact, the more vulnerable I was, then she would, anyway, it created this spark. So that became my default. And you experienced it. You came to town. I said, I think you might have said, hey, do you want to meet for lunch? I said, no, let's go for a hike and let's go for a cold plunge, whatever. So you experienced it. But that became my default because entrepreneurs would call, can I pick your brain? I'm raising capital, whatever. Just meet me in my house. We're going to go for a walk. Well, I realized how powerful that was. So I decided I was going to write a column for Outside Magazine. And I was going to call it Business Outside. And I started drafting a few things. And I talked to one of my forum mates and I told him the idea. And he's like, Bart, it's like, no, don't do that. He's like, they're just going to steal the idea. And it's brilliant. He's like, and it's bigger than just outside of nature. He's like, it's out of your comfort zone. It's like, it's outside of corporate norms. You're all about innovation. And that was the spark. It was business outside, it's doing things differently. And we use nature like a silent partner. And my buddy who told me not to do it, he said, go get the trademark, whatever. I'm like, you can't get the trademark, it's too generic. And we're walking across the tarmac and he shows me his phone. He's like, the URL is available. If you don't get it, I'm going to get it. And I bought the URL. We ended up getting the trademark. And that's kind of how it started. And what we started to realize is that people want to do business a little bit differently. They're tired of being cooped up in some conference room, ballroom bullshit with no windows. You go to these amazing destinations, these sales conferences, and I would get back and my wife would say, how is Costa Rica? How is Cabo? How is whatever, name the city. It's like, well, we didn't really see much because we were looking at PowerPoint slides and it's just a bunch of crap. And I realized like there's a better way. So that's what we do now. And we work with teams and leadership groups to help them build trust with each other. And I like to say motion creates emotion. And when you're walking shoulder to shoulder and you're not making direct eye contact, you're just more authentic, you're more vulnerable. So, we do stuff in the classroom, but we try to do it differently. We try to get to the feeling, the emotion, and build real connection. It's not about networking, it's about connection.
Mm.
Yeah.
One, that is exactly kind of how it happened. We would continue to text one another if I'm coming to Boulder or wherever. And it just so happened that I had texted you and you were there. And I said, hey, I always try to keep these things open-ended, which is you got any time. This is why you got any time I'm in town. This is the window. And the reason I keep it open-ended is because if anybody is generous and gracious enough to give me some of their time, it's on me then to take it. Like, hey, you got to meet them where they are, overall. And your response was, pick you up. I think it was pick you up at 6:30 or something like that. Like I'm going to Telluride. I got to drive to Telluride in the afternoon, so I got to be done by 9 or something. It was something like that. So I'll pick you up at 6:30. And then I asked you if I could bring my son. And you're like, sure, of course. So then I text my son and I'm like, 6:30, my hotel. Okay, we're getting picked up. And he's like, what? And it was just such a great opportunity for a life lesson about meeting people where they are. And when successful people who are busy as well as productive are generous and gracious enough to give you some of their time, then you take it or you don't. And if you don't, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And if you take it, there may be an opportunity there, but it led to another thing. Are you prepared to say yes whenever somebody asks? Meaning, are you in generally physical good condition to go hike? Okay. Are you willing and able, or have you sat in cold water or something like that before? Meaning like you don't have to get ready if you stay prepared. And I think there are some great life lessons around all of that if you're in shape, if you're healthy,
Mm.
if you understand meeting people where they are, if you appreciate generosity, all that, then the answer is yes when somebody's willing to give it to you. So, I mean, I was grateful
I
for that.
love
And it was
that.
awesome to share that with my son. My son doesn't do 3 minutes in the Boulder River or whatever they call that.
It's 52 degrees there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Two things came up to me when you just said and I want you to share that message with everybody because it's so important. The meeting people where they are. My dad used to tell me, he's like, if you don't go, you don't know. If you don't go, you don't. And a lot of people, they try to use an admin and they're going back and forth and texting. It's like if the person said they're available, just make it happen. And the other thing you said, I like to call it off the couch ready. If you could, that's my whole thing now. I just want to be off the couch ready so that if any of you guys call, that it might be painful, but I can at least show up and do it.
exactly. I say I'm not going to win anything, okay,
Okay.
but I'll finish, okay. I won't totally embarrass myself, but we all know those guys too, and I think that is the separator. You talked about being in the eye business in the better one or better two. You know, I use that example from the four-opter all the time about making better choices, one or two. You know, what do we keep doing? You keep going one or two, until ultimately you've got that clear vision. You make better decisions, you get clarity, you get opportunity that didn't exist before. I mean, we know those guys. When I had a cancellation for 29029, I knew exactly who I could call that would be ready without having to have said, "Oh, I didn't train for this. I'm not ready," or, you know,
Isn't that great?
what?
Yeah,
And you got a longer list. Unfortunately, sometimes the guys, aren't. So,
that's
you
cool.
can pick from those pools around who you want to be around. I want to go back to asking you, you get Business Outside going, which is phenomenal. And you've got the book, by the way, I've got it right here. Okay. So anybody can pick up the book, which is fantastic. Discover your path forward. You're gung ho on this. You think there's a new and better way to do it. You've sat in enough boardrooms, fluorescent lights, looking out at Costa Rica and not seeing it. What obstacles did you face? I mean, were you trying to convince businesses, companies that didn't do it that way to do it? Were you looking at companies that already were thinking about doing it different? Like, how have you approached this?
What I learned is it's hard to talk about and read about. You have to experience it. And once they experience it, it's like this unlock. It's like, holy shit. Like we could actually do a keynote presentation on top of a rock while people are sitting in the shade. Like we don't need PowerPoints. Like really? And they start realizing, and then all of a sudden, so 100% of our stuff has been word of mouth because people experience it and they tell someone else. We're just now trying to flip it and say, okay, from a marketing perspective, how do we get the word out? How do we, and it's a challenge, like, because it is different. It's unique.
Who are your first responders, I guess, are your super consumers?
The super fans,
Yes.
people that experience it, it's an unlock for them because, and it's a lot of big company executives, frankly, that have not been that entrepreneurial, that have been kind of in a rigid environment with a lot of infrastructure and bureaucracy, frankly, of, well, we've always done it this way. We do a strategic planning meeting, once a quarter. We do our sales meeting. This is how it works. We got the awards trip, and it's cookie cutter, and it's a proven formula that people know. But the ones that grab onto it are the ones that are somewhat innovative. They want to do something differently. They've reached a point, seriously, in the life like we are in this midlife, and it's like, is this it? Right? And you meet these guys that are making 500,000 a year, and all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I have all the toys and all the stuff, but I'm not happy. And we're trying to help them create that life by design.
What should those guys be doing? That avatar? Because I believe that money doesn't buy happiness. I do believe, though, that money can provide. I like money. Money can provide a lot of opportunities,
Yeah.
experiences, other things. I do think if you're a genuinely or generally happy person, that certainly having a bunch of money can make you happier, allow you to do certain things, but it doesn't buy happiness. And that avatar that you just described, the guy that's going broke on a 500,000 or even $1 million a year, the guy that's unhappy in there, that's prevalent. That
Yeah.
is, that's where the midlife crisis, if you will, comes from. They talk about midlife and it becomes synonymous with crisis as opposed to synonymous with happiness and fulfillment and content and all those other things. And we're all, I think, looking to flip the switch on that. What
Yep.
do you tell that guy, whether that guy is the executive who is hiring business outside, or whether that's the individual who is filling out, the value, the personal value statement?
Yep.
Because I think we've both been there to an extent. The what I call
100%.
the mediocre or miserable midlife millionaire.
So I always, I would say you start with looking at the past. So you look at the past year. What gave you energy? What zapped your energy? It can be that simple. And these are people, places, the things that just lit you up. Conversely, what are the things that drag you down that were like anchors that zapped your energy? And you do a quick assessment and say, okay, we want more of the things that give us energy and less of the things that zap our energy. And it sounds really simple, and it is. But then you look at some of the best memories that you made, the people you're with, all those things. And then you say, okay, now look at our personal values. We create a personal value statement, your zone of genius. And you say, okay, based on where I was, here's my present. And then we put the plan together for the future, which is how do we create a life by design? How do we be more intentional? So as an example, I made a list of all the people that give me energy. And there's probably 17 on the list, right? And if I knew you just a little bit better, Greg, you're on the list, you give me energy, right? And we all go through these little, I call them a funk. And sometimes they last 2 days, sometimes it's a little bit longer. And I can't put my finger on it, but you go through these little funks. I pull out the list of people that give me energy and I give them gratitude. Hey man, glad you're in my life, whatever, because immediately it just comes back in this like gratitude loop. And it's hard to be grateful and kind of depressed at the same time.
Mm.
But the whole point is then you create a life by design that is aligned with your values, your zone of genius, and it's happening by you instead of to you. And we map that out. And if we can have accountability partners, just like you're developing your community, and we have calls like this, because look, the higher up we get and the older we get, there's just not a lot of people to talk to about some of this stuff. And to create forums that you can talk and share openly and be vulnerable, because no one's got it figured out. And the people that say they do, they just got a big ego and we don't need them anyway.
Mm.
We're all figuring it out together.
The people that give you energy list geographically, like, do you
All
think,
over. Yeah.
right? I'm saying, do you think that that really matters? Like, I've got this feeling now that like kind of the home field advantage is gone, if you will. Like the people that inspire me, that give me the most energy, are not necessarily the ones that live the closest, because
100%.
I think in a lot of our lives we inherit people like by default.
Yep.
Like it just happens, okay? Where my kids played little league, you get the other dads, in there. Where they
Totally.
go to school, you get the other dads in the families. Where you work, at your company, and I had this, we went from 45 to 200 people. You went from wherever to 4,000 kiosks and everything. You inherit a lot of bodies, if you a lot of people, and they're not always your people. And I think that there's this kind of really wonderful situation now where we can actually connect with people all over the world. We can be inspired by people and get energy from people all over the world. Uh, that I think is great. And my list is probably, I think I actually do better with people that are all over so I can focus on my thing. And then, like,
100%.
I know Bart's always involved. I know if I look at you any morning, like, I know I can see swimming, I can see that, I can see business outside. Boom. I know my buddy Mark is in Miami. If I walk into his gym, I know he's going to be in there on that rowing machine. That consistency is what. Are yours all spread out? Do you have what you would consider a lot of close friends, or do you have just people that give you energy in a tighter circle?
I think Zoom changed the game on a lot of things. And because we can build meaningful relationships. It's not the same as in person, but it does really work. And I find to build the deepest connections, it's about vulnerability and it's a practice. Chip Conley says building friendships is like a practice. You have to practice yoga, you practice tennis, like you should practice your friendships. And a lot of people don't. And they have their 5 or 6 close friends and they forget about everybody else. I've actually cultivated a practice that I try to keep in touch with, a ton of people. And so that's a piece of it, but it is all over the place. Yeah.
Justin had a couple of good questions that are in here. What's your go-to meeting option for men, women that aren't interested in the active meeting option? Is that a hard is there like, are we weeding those people out in there? Or like, meaning you don't, hey, like if this is the way I do things, and if you don't do it, I think that's what he's asking in there. But is there another meeting option for guys or gals that aren't interested in the active style?
So we always will dumb it down to the lowest common denominator. And we've had people, disabilities, limps, whatever. Like, it's not about how far we go and how active. It's about just being together outside and talking about things that matter in real conversation. So we've been in the middle of basically a middle of a strip mall parking lot in Wisconsin, and we just walk around the parking lot. It's more about the questions you ask and how you do it.
Yeah, just to kind of clarify the question a little bit, I feel like I have buckets of friends that are very active. So like I know for sure if I reach out to Greg and say, hey, do you want to catch up and let's do it over a cold plunge or a walk or whatever, he's all in. I have other friends where I could give them 10 options of active things and they're like, I kind of want to have a drink. I want to go meet for a meal. I want to whatever, right? So then there's two paths, right? You either take that meeting and you try to fit in, or you're just like, maybe we're not going to meet, right? I'm kind of curious, what's worked for you since you lean very active. It seems like in terms of how you're willing to connect with people.
I learned that, our time is one of our most valuable assets. And for me, I want to be around people that either I like or I want to be like. And usually that's somewhat self-selecting. And often I'll purposefully say, hey, do you want to meet at 6? Because if they don't, that tells, I do this thing called the Skyline Traverse, and I bring in entrepreneurs and they show up, and we purposefully do it on a Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. because it weeds out everybody else.
Is that the one that's 10 hours, by the way? You
Yeah,
can do the whole
it's
thing?
fun.
Okay.
We're just walking. But if you're a corporate fuddy-duddy and you can't, prioritize your time, whatever, that's unfortunate. I don't know if that answers your question, but I do have friends, Justin, like you're saying, and it's just a different level of friendship. I used to have a lot of beer drinking friends and watching football, and that's great, and I enjoy that sometimes too. Yeah.
I'll chime in that I think it's a once a year thing.
I think
Go
my
ahead.
takeaway is that you're choosing to self-select people that are aligned with the kind of things you like to do. And if someone won't show up in that, then they're kind of like out of the circle for the most part.
Yeah.
I say that with no judgment. I feel I'm like 80% of the way there. I just have maybe my bucket's a little. Anyway, I appreciate you've answered the question. I understand your perspective, and it makes a lot of sense, and I love it.
Bart, I wanted to ask you, speaking of things that you can do that most people cannot do. Okay, you just took on an amazing challenge. What was it, Lisbon? Is that where you were?
Yeah, I was in Portugal.
In
Yeah.
Portugal. And it was 13 mile swim.
It was supposed to be 20K, which is 12.4 miles. And at 12 miles, I looked on my watch and I was like, all right, I got this. I can do it. I put my head down and when I looked up and the finish line was nowhere in sight. And it dawned on me, well, it's only 12.4 miles if you swim straight. So I ended up swimming like 13 and a half miles. Yeah, it was my Misogi. I had never swam even a third of that far. And a Misogi is that Japanese term, it's picking one big life defining thing a year and that you have a 50% chance of failing. And they had an 8-hour cutoff. I thought I was going to finish in 6 hours and I finished in 7, a little over 7, but I made it.
How did you choose this? It's amazing. One, how did you choose, or how do you go about choosing your Misogis, the one you did, and I guess the future ones that are coming up?
I had always wanted to swim a 10K and I had on my list for 5 years. And every year I do my goals and I'd look back and and I just never had it got it done. And this year, my daughter was studying in Portugal, and I looked on the map, and I just happened to look open water swims, and I saw, holy shit, there's this festival, and the dates worked, and the big one was 20K. And I had no idea that there would only be 84 people in that, and only 2 Americans. And I'm at the start line. The guy next to me is like swimming English Channel in a week, and somebody next to him was swimming the Straits of Gibraltar. And I said, I am completely fish out of water, literally. I had a big imposter syndrome, but I finished. Yeah,
But congratulations on that.
it's super fun.
Do you have a process that you go through to sit down and plan these things? Based upon, again, you have your personal value statement. I have what I call my personal operating system. And all these. Okay, as a husband, father, business owner, provider, man, athlete, like, what's your process of okay, how much time I spend with my kids? Here's something that I can do, but my daughter's over there. Here's something I do for me. What is my wife? And do you have a process where you kind of look at your year, your quarter, your months, and say, okay, these things all have to fit. They have to fit budgetarily, they have to fit time-wise, they have to fit, in all of these areas. And like you mentioned at the beginning, if there's not alignment there, if there's not trust in all of this, it doesn't work.
Yes. So I used to set goals, and it kind of, I would say I would do that every year. And 2 years ago, we created that journal, just basically to create a life by design. And part of it is exactly what you're saying is you pick a misogi, you pick these mini adventures you're going to do, and then you lay out different categories, personal, family, business, finance, health. And then I break them into, 6-month, 90-day goals that I can kind of line up to say, is this aligned with my values, my zone of genius, and then create a life again that's more directive by me. And then I'll look at it, I'll go back at the end of the year and just assess and see which ones did I hit or not.
Do you have family meetings around these things? Like, do your kids now do the same thing? Does your wife?
So it's funny.
Come
I
together.
created a really simple worksheet that I started doing with my kids around Christmas. And my wife would kind of roll her eyes. My kids were not really into it. I forced them to do it. I thought they weren't really listening. And we have some of them. We still do it. And I think it kind of wore off just a little bit. And it was simple. And it was like, what were 3 of the most memorable moments from the year ahead? What did you do or from the year before? What's something you did that, you got out of your comfort zone? And, what are some things you want to do next year? And it was really simple, but just to have them write it down. I think that the takeaway for me is they're always watching, and they're observing, and they're listening. And just like you've been a good role model for your son, it's really cool.
I think we certainly try. I think what's also great about it, again, is being able to, as much as we want to live and lead by example and they're always watching, I think what's also great is that they also don't want to always get it from their dad, from their dad. They don't see their, still their dad. When they get to see, I think, who their dad is hanging around with. And other people, I think, who their dad is hanging around with, or who actually likes their dad, like that energy list, like you mentioned, and what's going on there, that's when some of those light bulbs kind of go off, like, oh, okay, like that's how you network, or those guys don't look like all the other guys on the sidelines or at the school or wherever. And it's not to say like better, again, better or worse, but it's just back to, again, by design, like we can curate who we want to be around. We can create boundaries and borders for who meets the criteria of the way that we live. And it's not wrong if you want to go for a late dinner and have drinks. It's just not me,
So
who wakes up at 6 and prefers to go for smoothies in the hike, in there.
Totally. So I got a story that it'll relate to what you just said. So I don't know if you've heard of Walter Green. He was a guy that was on Peter Attia's podcast, and it kind of took off. When he was 70, he made a list of all the people that made a profound impact on his life. And for him, it was 44 people. And he spent a year, and he went and met with each of them for half a day. Have you heard this story?
I have not. No.
So Walter met with these 44 people, and he shared three things. It was how we met, all the life experiences we had together, and then the profound impact that these people made on his life. And he recorded it, took a picture, and he memorialized it, whatever. He went on this Peter Attia podcast. That's how I found out about him. Well, I assumed it was very recent. Well, he's 84 now, and he did a TED talk, and it's called Say It Now. And the whole point is eulogize the living. Like, why do we wait until someone dies to, to tell them how much they make us feel? Anyway, I ended up having a chance to meet Walter. He's in San Diego, took me to dinner, and so much of what we do is really similar, but he inspired me. I turned 50 this year. And the thing I did, and it's related to what you just said about your son and leading by example, is I decided that I was going to create a rafting trip. And it was a multi-day, 4 days, Utah, Colorado. We had guides and the whole thing. We camp along the river. And I sent this email out. And I invited people from all aspects of my life. So college, startup, Boulder, all different guys that were in my wedding, some 35, 40-year friendships. Everybody was around 50, 60, somewhere in there, except one guy, my son. He's 19. And for 4 days, off the grid, very intentional conversations about things that matter. And we did one of the around the fire pit, we're talking about the Mexican fisherman story, and we actually did a reading. And you've heard the story, and
Yeah.
it gets to the end, and my son, we're going around, final reflections, are you the Mexican fisherman? Are you the tourist? Whatever it was. And my son looked at one of my good friends. He's like, I've been to Oakmont, Mr. Natwick. He's like, there's no fishermen there. And he said, I know that, I'm young, I have to work hard. It was just like this mic drop. But I say all that because they're watching, they're listening. And the best example we can do is show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Right. And if we surround ourselves with people that we like, we love, we want to be like, that have good values, that I think is the best lesson we can give any of our kids.
So good. And this is how we learn. And this is like, I hear that and go, okay, I want to steal this trip idea, also, and be like, okay, these are the things again that are important that we should be doing. So 50 to 60. What does life by design look like for you? What are you thinking? The massive projects, if you will, between 50 and 60. Have you thought of that?
So one of my blind spots is because I facilitate and I ask these really challenging questions, I often deflect and I don't answer them myself. And I need to spend more time with that, frankly. 10 years are going to go by fast. One of the exercises I love, it's called the future backwards, and I need to do it myself. And what I'll do for that is I'm going to write down how old my kids are, right? So in 10 years, they're 32, 33. I'm 60. And then I want to go for a walk with somebody like you, Greg, and then I will share with you what happened over the last 10 years as if it already happened. And we'll talk in the future tense. I need to do that myself. I think there's probably another book. I think this company has all the makings of going global, and we could have a lot of facilitators that can lead in different markets and different sectors, different geographies. I think we could compete with people like McKinsey and Bain and really develop these teams that are high performing. And I think Business Outside has a real potential there. So that's on that side. We'll be married, 38 years by that point, something like that. So it's kind of cool. I'd love to be on a lake at some point. I want to swim. I'd love a lake house. I don't know. But I want to just keep living into my values and what I love, and hopefully having the freedom and the health to keep going.
Amazing stuff. Bart, thank you so much for all of your time. I really, really appreciate it. Learning more about you, your story, Business Outside, your achievements, personal, professional, athletic accomplishments. I think it's all awesome. You're absolutely on that people who give me energy list, and I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
You too. If I can help any of you guys, I appreciate it. It's lonely sometimes, and I think you're creating a community that we all need. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Guys, check out everything Bart is doing. Go grab a copy of his book, Business Outside, Discover Your Path Forward. Hit him up if you're in Boulder, if you can keep up with him in there. And Bart, anytime you head this way, make sure you let me know. Okay?
Let's do it. Thanks, guys.
You got it. All right, guys. Have a wonderful afternoon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you.